Good morning and welcome to an Account-Based Friday special edition. We've got Heidi Bullock joining us out of the West Coast in Palo Alto, very early morning there. So Heidi, I'm grateful that we're able to connect today. Megan may join us in flight. She's juggling another commitment, so hopefully she'll be joining us partway through. We got an exciting conversation, but before we get into the excitement of that conversation, I just want to remind everybody, in the upper corner, there's a QR code. That QR code brings you to 350 top go-to-market strategy videos in AI, ABM, demand generation, SDR, sales, you name it. If you have a specific question that you'd like to get addressed, whether it's here in our discussion today, which you can drop in LinkedIn and we'll promote up, or if you've got a question on the video, feel free to DM either myself or Meg, and we can certainly get you the answer to that in terms of our subject matter experts. But speaking of which, we've got a great subject matter expert today, Heidi Bullock, who joins us, having led marketing and demand gen at Marketo, names that you would know, Engagio, which got acquired by Demandbase, and now CMO of Tealium. And I think, Heidi, our paths crossed back in Engagio briefly when we were one of the implementation partners for Engagio. And so you've got, what I learned in that short amount of time is you've got an incredible knowledge of ABM. You've been kind of at the catbird seat, but I'm curious, given everything that you know about ABM, like what are you seeing or what's relevant today that is changing maybe toward the future here in ABM?
Yeah, and I think it's a really good question because I think there's a few things that are happening. I think for everybody that's listening, we all know that ABM, account-based marketing, it's not new. It's a tactic that people have used for a really long time, and I think it's more about definitely being focused. And I think the things that we've seen change, obviously, are the technology supporting it, right? So the overall strategy, those things I think have been consistent. But I think a few things I personally have seen in the SaaS space, like it's tough right now. I think a lot of your listeners will probably relate to that. I think a lot of, like we've just talked about this, people are under a lot of pressure to grow, but I think a lot of the sales cycles are slowing down. We're seeing that. I think buyers are, I think there's more choices than ever before, but there's a lot of scrutiny. And I just think SaaS is a tough space. And so something that I think a lot about for companies is, okay, we still have a lot of the same goals to grow, be more efficient, retain customers. And if you're using ABM, what are some of the unlocks and things that you can do differently? And hopefully that's what you and I can talk a lot about today, because we try a lot of things, and I'd love to pass on some of the things that we're seeing work to your listeners.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The cost of acquiring a client has gone through the roof, and because of that, now there seems to be an emphasis on both the efficiency, because nobody's hiring like they once did a few
Right.
years ago. So, and potentially, I don't want to say replacing with AI, maybe augmenting with AI. I know we're going to be talking about a couple other areas too that have changed, but I'm curious, like where have you seen the pendulum swing with AI as part of that equation? You can't have a conversation without AI, but where have you
We'll get
seen that?
into it.
Uh,
Yeah, we're
in,
going to
in,
get into it. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, there's kind of two schools of thought that I just observe, and I think there's people that are sort of like, wow, AI, we're excited and we're adopting it and we're just getting in. And I think that's kind of where I'm leaning. Like I'm excited for it. I think it's a pretty unusual time in our lifetimes in general. Like it's I've never seen technology expand, grow, and change things like I have now. But I still see also like another camp of people that feel sort of, and I get this, like change is hard for people. And I observe this at when marketing automation came into play, or like even intent, there's the folks that are like, we're all in, we're adopting it. And there's people that are just like, it feels overwhelming. And I think what I would say to people is, for me, it's been such an unlock for certain areas of our business. And like you just said, I think there isn't a CEO out there that's not like, look, you can replace certain things with AI. You can become more efficient. We're expecting it. And to me, it's a lever that I've been playing around with, and I am seeing it. especially in the areas like with ABM, the key that we've always talked about is that one-to-one hyper-personalization. I think we've talked about that forever. And I think that while some of the technology is helping us with that, the big thing that still has been hard is coming up with the content and really delighting people and meeting them where they are. But I think a lot of the things that I'm seeing with AI, and I can get specific about what we're using, um, it's really unlocking a lot of that. Like, I think we're using a tool called Copy AI, and I think that is, and we have some of the capabilities embedded in Salesforce. So, a seller can say, here's an account, this is a person that I'm interested in, and here's most likely things that they're going to care about. It's just the ability to do that at scale versus having a dedicated ABM marketer that did that for a seller. That's a big deal. There's other tools. AirOps is one that your listeners should take a look at as well. And what I'd say is it's not an easy button, and that's what and maybe at some point it will become that, but you still have to say, here's our brand guidelines. These are our personas. This is the content they care about. And so I think you and I talked about it earlier. It takes building that foundation, just like Marketo, just like any of the tools, you kind of have to set it up correctly. But once you do, it really helps you go fast. But it isn't something that you're just going to like log in, press go, and it's done. You still have to put in some work.
Yeah, I think you had so much great content in that last section there. Maybe starting with the end first, because that's what I remember. But going back to your point of you really have to put in the work to get the value out of it. And so many people, at least we find with our clients, kind of abandon ship. It's almost like a puppy. I call it like a puppy or a baby,
Right,
where you have to train and spend the time and make it into a grown up to do the adult decisions. And maybe
right.
decisions is too much, but it's that maturation process that you have to go through. So I totally agree with you on that foundational piece.
You still
And
need the strategy. I mean, that's what people, it's like there's been a lot of discussion lately, and I was actually just up at the Databricks conference, and a lot of what people are talking about is AI is not replacing people. You still need empathy. You still need people that think through strategy. You still need a human being in the process. And I think that's like, if there's one message today for people listening, it's like you still need that good strategy and thoughtful, these are the accounts we're trying to attack. And yes, you can use AI to help refine your ICP or your scoring. Great. But you still need to think through, these are people, what content are they going to resonate with? What are the key messages? You still have to think through all of that, but then AI can just help automate a lot of those processes that I feel like in the past, like you would need a dedicated, like a field marketer or an ABM marketer to like do all those steps.
yeah, great point. Almost like the human in a loop kind of activity where you almost have to check the output
Right.
and also feed it the right questions or prompts to get the best value out of it. Um, when you were talking earlier about some specific use cases, maybe we can dive a little deeper into that as far as what you've experienced within ABM, where AI is either making an impact or you're not quite convinced that it's making an impact. Have you seen anything there trend wise? And I think you began talking about it with Copy AI, and I think
Yeah.
Airtable was the other one.
AirOps.
AirOps.
AirOps. But again, both of those tools, amazing, but you still have to put in the work up front. Like you can't expect to just like log in and like all of a sudden everything is taken care of. You still have to have a thoughtful process around, hey, I want to make sure that things get trained on my brand, the right voice, the right content. So for me, the big unlocks, and I think, we were talking about this earlier, a lot of people have been, I would say there were eras where it was, grow at all costs. I think at my time at Marketo, it was, I felt like we were growing very rapidly, but there was always just like, great, let's invest more, let's invest more. And now we're in a time where it's like, hey, couldn't you do that with half the SDRs? Couldn't you do that without a content marketer at all? And so I completely get that people it's stressful, and the idea to learn something new is tough. But the areas that I've seen AI really help are, so as an example, really helping, for me, it's always about reducing friction. how can I make things easier for our sales team and make it more scalable? And I would say, I'm not giving ourselves like we're not at 100% by any means, but I think we're trying to help with more, here's an account you're interested in. Like I said, using Copy Aid to help them scale emails that are personal and a lot more automated, so they don't have to think about each of these steps. Because as you know, some of these accounts, it's going to take 8 months, a year. It's like, and you need to kind of keep those activities going, which is really important. I think we see, for me, another area that I'm excited about just with CDPs, like in Tealium and specifically, is the ability to, engage people in real time quickly and have a lot more of, automated engagement set up that, continue to learn and get better. So that way, over time, that personalization really gets better. And the ability to just, I think, do that at scale is what I'm excited about. Like, in a lot of these tools will get us to that place. So then that our marketing teams can spend a lot more time, I'd say, on the strategy. But that's, for me, like, I always think about where are places in the business I can reduce friction. And so I would say content right now is a big one for us. And then I said, like, automating some of the sales processes that normally a marketer would be doing. An area that I am excited about, I would love us to start tackling automating budget in some cases. Our team, I feel like, spends a lot of time on manual budget updates, and that's an area that I want to start using AI for. So getting rid of some of those things that I think take a lot of time, but I don't really feel like are a huge value add.
Yeah, I'm curious. You mentioned kind of that AI journey that you've gone through, and I'm thinking of a couple client examples without calling out their names because we're in early days of testing. But the strategy of how do you involve AI versus headcount internally, and like I could say for an example of a client that wasn't going to hire a campaign strategy, but they
Mhm.
have somebody that could overlook it. We have helped them find an AI agent to identify and create the outreach in Marketo, integrated with Marketo, to do very simplistic campaign outreach. And it
Right.
has oversight, obviously. It's not something you can just set and forget. That's one example. There's other examples of an agent replacing marketing automation and SDRs, but that was a different kind of scenario. In both cases, though, headcount was an issue in those organizations where they weren't going to be getting headcount. And so it was almost like they were forced down the AI path. Not necessarily AI was the first choice. It was, hey, I know you want headcount, but you're not getting it.
Getting it right.
So the people within the teams, including us who are the virtual teams, had to figure out, all right, if they're not getting headcount, how are we going to do it? That's when AI kind of stepped in. What's that what, either at Databricks or within your own company, if you feel comfortable sharing, is that the same conversation, the same trajectory, or like how are you seeing things there?
Yeah, I think it's definitely been like a forcing function, to your point. Like, I think a lot of organizations over probably the last few years, especially maybe the last two, everyone's like, hey, we still have the same goals and objectives, but yeah, your C-suite's basically saying you might get half the people, or we need you to cut the team by two. And so you're right. I mean, I think one of the areas we're exploring, and we're pretty far down the path, is with an AI SDR for our website. We basically, we're using OneMind. We have our model trained, and we're just doing the last bit of QA testing. And the idea there is that, at least for people that initially come to the website and have questions, again, think about it. In the past, this would get routed to somebody, and maybe if you're in a different time zone, it might take a longer time to get a response. The person may not have the answer, so then they've got to go look that up or find somebody that knows it. So the idea here is that this is kind of like a first line of being able to address questions for people in a delightful way that's accurate. And to me, it's just, again, it's that reducing friction. But to your point, that's a whole person probably that we're not going to need, but we might then be able to apply that to another area of the business, assuming things continue to go really well there. So that's to me, I agree with you. There's been, I think, because people are under pressure, it forces them to look at some of these options. But I'm just excited because, again, it's an area where we can reduce friction for the buyer, which is always my first lens. And then hopefully that will have a really good positive business impact.
Yeah, and certainly that one mind example that you just shared on the website, I think that's a great example and
Right.
great idea. A lot of technologies kind of swimming around there. I'm
Yeah.
curious, like, have you? It sounds like you're in early days of it, but if you are willing to share,
Yeah. No, sure.
because it might be proprietary, but any lessons learned in terms of how you ramped up the
Yes.
AI SDR?
Yes, and this is what I would say with everything that I'm seeing right now. Like again, just this was true with us for Copy AI. This is true with One Mind. You really have to have your internal kind of content together. Meaning, like, do you have the right messaging? Do you? Because again, think of these are all LLMs that have to get trained on the right material. So if you don't know what to train it on, that's an internal challenge. So even one thing I would say to people listening, even if you're not quite there, but you're considering AI, some sort of agent or using an LLM, make sure like right now, the one thing I would tell people is get your data in a good place because you're going to have to do that anyway. So just make sure that you're very clear on like your value prop, the content, all the things that you would want to train a model on. And in my observation, John, is the limiting factors. Again, it's not the technology, it's typically the company and the people, and making sure, oh, we all agree that this is the pitch that we want to use. This is all the things that we feel are appropriate to train it on, and getting a group together to agree on that. That's, I think, what can take time. And we've, I think, done a pretty good job keeping our content organized. But even us, I mean, that's the thing that I think that took time. And then obviously doing the QA testing and making sure that the responses are all making sense and everything's good. But so far it's been really promising. One other area that I will throw out to people that I think has been important is, using AI for, again, just creating messaging and doing message testing, and also for competitive intelligence in the product marketing world. And I think, product marketing in general is one of those areas it's so critical, especially in the current markets. Like, how are you standing out? What's the story you're telling? And for people to use, different, even if it's just like ChatGPT or Perplexity or, whatever you're using, just to kind of see how is your company coming across? Like, are you showing up in LLMs? Are you, is the message what you think it is? And where can you optimize there? That to me has been a huge unlock, because again, like, you might have demand gen teams that are like, oh, we're waiting on product marketing for our financial services messaging. Well, I mean, I think that's becoming easier, right? Like, in theory, you can get a lot of that now. And then maybe your product marketing team's just saying, yeah, that's pretty close, or we're going to just change it around a little bit. But to me, that's another area that people, if they're not doing it, should.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it kind of touches on the third topic of brand and demand a little bit too, in terms of how people are reaching you and that experience. On one hand, you've got you're reducing the friction, if I'm hearing you right, on the
Right.
website side, and you're wanting to make sure you generate demand in the right search or generative AI optimization side of things. So, have you seen anything from a branded demand shift here, maybe going into the future or now versus say 6 months ago, in terms of a trend that people should be keeping an eye out for both brand and demand as they're thinking that through going into the tail end of the year here?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think like you can think about all the great ways that you can engage somebody once they get to your website. Like we talked about it. You can have, an AI SDR, or, hyper personalization, or flows that are ready to engage. That's great. But then you kind of think about like, how are you getting somebody there? And then how are you keeping them interested? And I just think it's almost brand, to me, plays even a more important role. And I think finally in B2B, we're seeing that. I feel like that's been a talk track for a lot of people over the last year, but I couldn't agree more. And I think something we're seeing is we're doing a lot more of very like targeted field events, and just having experiences where people get to know your company. They get to know what you stand for. And it almost matters more, because I feel like that's the piece where people start to get that, I always feel like you have to sort of delight somebody's mind, but also their emotional side of things. And you just can't underestimate that. At the end of the day, you think of a lot of technology and you're just like, there may be 3 products, and are they that different? Probably not. So why would you go with one versus the other? It's often because, wow, I really like the technical people at that company, or wow, I really feel like they're producing materials that are going to help me. So I think in this world where things are, they are heavily digital, a lot of people are going to do more, we know, online, and it might be shifting to using, LLMs, and all of these tools versus maybe like your typical search. But it's almost like brand plays more of even a more important role. What's your story? How are you standing out? And always thinking about just the perception for your buyer, and what is that? And now all these tools, you can really examine that more. But like I said, I mean, I just feel like the content is almost more important, and the experience you provide people is even more important.
Yeah, it's a really tricky dynamic and of that whole brand and demand from what we've seen of like demand is very I don't want to say coin operated, but you can almost connect the dots
Right,
in a non-marketer's eyes, right? Like, and I'm partially guilty of this too because we do a lot of dashboarding of
right,
performance. So it's easy to say, oh, you do X and you get Y. And within brand, it's a little squishier. I'll ask an unfair question, which you may
sure.
or may not have a good answer for. Have any advice on how to kind of make brand more definable for, say, a C-level CFO, or if you're defending that investment, how do you defend a brand investment versus a demand investment? Because we both know how important they are, but
Correct.
it's really challenging to like get that CFO to understand, hey, this is worth investing in.
Right. I mean, there's two things that way I'd answer that. I think one, there is a lot with brand you can measure. I would say more than ever before. But I also think with a lot of things in marketing, the reality is a lot of the data will be directional. People want to think it's absolute, but I always think that there's things that you're just going to miss certain signals. I mean, even say like you call me later today and you're like, wow, here's a tool that you should take a look at. How am I measuring that I mean, there's just no way, right? There's
Right.
all these things that I think. So I always look at data as it's never an absolute, it's more directional. That's the first thing I'd say. But one thing that I think has worked for me is I kind of step back and talk to people about, really, you think of demand gen and you think of channels, and they're almost like cars as an example. And to me, your brand is the gas you're putting in that car. So to me, like, an event is an event. We've both been to great events, and we've been to some that are absolutely terrible. Why is that? We've both looked at ebooks. Some are great, and you're just like, wow, I'm going to keep that in my browser to keep referring to, or or maybe that's just me. That's kind of a weird thing. I do that, but or like it's so forgettable. Or here's a great webinar or podcast, and here's one that it's not the channel, it's what you're talking about, it's the brand, it's what you put into it. And I think that when people understand that, it's more of like it clicks for them. It's like you go into your grocery store and there's an aisle of ice cream. It's all ice cream. Why are you picking one over the other? I mean, in a lot of cases, they all taste pretty good. There's something that is grabbing you, and I think that in B2B, that's what everyone needs to think about. And I do think you can measure it. One thing that I love to do with executives, it's like, look, we'll do 2 webinars. Let's kind of have one message here and one there. Let's see how they perform. That's like your content, that's your brand. And so there are things that people can do. I mean, can you capture every little signal when you do a big conference? It's pretty challenging, but there is a lot that you can measure. So I always try to do my best there. And I think it's you can't underestimate the importance of always educating your executives on that, because I just never assume that people are going to know or get it. But when they do and it clicks, it just makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. Yeah. It sounds like it's been a bit of a process. And I loved how you were talking about the directional data. There is no absolutes.
There's
I
not.
think that to me was a tough thing to wrap my mind around initially, like many, many years ago, because I was thinking, oh, it's an absolute. And you're right. It's
Not.
directional at best.
At best,
Um,
and people wanna think it is, but it's not. And I
right.
just think it's always, like, before you do something, even say it's a billboard on the 101, right? And it's like people might say it's really hard to measure, but maybe your hypothesis is, we're gonna put up a billboard, and you know what? That's gonna help us with hiring, Great. Take a baseline before you do it and after, and like, did it create the lift or not? I mean, so, and is that a perfect measurement? No. But the more you can kind of have a hypothesis going in, or you're going to launch a book. Okay, what do we expect that book's going to do? I mean, if it gets you more conversations and you can show that before and after, great, amazing. But I think it's just kind of going in and always setting that baseline first so you can show that lift. And again, there's always so many pieces that are involved. It's never that one thing, but
No,
it helps people understand it.
makes a ton of sense. Just keeping an eye on time here, and I know you got a busy schedule. I wanted to get to customer marketing, but kind of tie back to what you were saying earlier about the challenges of growth right now. I think
Right.
we were talking even pre-show, like, hey, CAC has gone up, growth has slowed, and so now there's a bit of a pivot toward, I think, for marketing to go toward customer marketing. I guess a couple questions. One, I want to ask you about trends there, but two, incentives of your team or how you're thinking about it would be helpful to share if you're able to share that. The reason I say that is typically what I find is marketers are not incented to
Mhm.
do upsell, cross sell. So you wouldn't be alone if your team or you are not tied to that, but because most of the gun is pointed toward new logo acquisition for marketers.
Right.
And so now we're in a world where customer growth, 50% or more of your growth is coming from upsell or cross sell. So any thoughts on that trend wise or comp wise that you've seen that
Yeah.
would be helpful?
I mean, I think especially in SaaS, like if people do not think that, retention and expansion are part of growth, I mean, that's that's kind of
Yeah.
like one kind of key takeaway. It's like it's acquisition is a piece of growth, but it's not the only part of that equation. And I think that's something for me that it's always been a big deal. And I've talked about this for a long time, but you will go, like you just said, we'll go in companies and it's like, wow, the demand gen team's, 10 people. And you're like, where's customer marketing? It's like two people, and that what they do are references. And that to me is a big mistake. I think a lot of companies talk about the importance of customer marketing, but you need to invest there. And for me, we are tied to expansion. That is a big deal for us. And so that is something that I think a lot about. I always make sure with customer marketing, you definitely have the side of the house that's focused on, references and case studies and different sort of like programs like that, which are really important and critical. But I also am thinking about, it's almost like a marriage. Like, it's like getting married isn't really the hard part. It's like keeping that marriage exciting and alive, is that's where the work comes in, right? So it's like that's how it is with your customer. You've got to earn the right to be, in that relationship every day. So what are you doing? Like, what are you doing to make it easier for them to be successful, making it easier for them to show value in their organization? So, the short answer to your question is I have dedicated people for that. They are incentivized towards that. And I think even for your sales team and thinking of like your plan of record, I think it's important for people to have goals for net new and expansion. And I think that sometimes it's a different motion. And it's really important because you always are going to get what you measure and have goals around. And if you don't, guess what? People are always going to take the easiest path. And I think especially in SaaS, you cannot ignore your customers. And so, yeah, I think we have dedicated programs and plans around that for sure. Like, it's almost like its own separate demand gen engine, but focused at the customer base.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think so many companies struggle with that thought process of getting marketing more involved in the customer marketing side. And if you don't have that, I guess the risk to me would be you have to work twice as hard on the net new logo
Right.
acquisition, which right now is just not happening at the speed that it once did. So,
It's not, right.
um,
So you want to keep like what you've worked so hard to get. And, I just, some thoughts for people. You can have some people on your demand gen team that know those motions, have them dedicated for that. And so that have them like think about those programs because that's a lot of their skill set. And then you still can have other people that are focused on, making sure that you do all the other things in customer marketing that are super critical as well.
Great points. Great points. I just noticed the time here right at the bottom of the hour. We've had a great conversation, AI, brand demand, customer marketing. Any closing thoughts on your side as we exit to the rest of the 2025 here?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely kind of a wild time for sure, but I think just that my closing thoughts would be just stay curious and just be somebody that loves learning. And I think it can always feel, anything new is hard. Marketing automation was hard when it came out. I think for a lot of people, intent for a lot of people was something to get their head around. And I just think just stay curious, because a lot of these tools, like once you get in and kind of get over the hump, it can be an amazing unlock for your business.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Heidi. I am so grateful that we were able to connect today and reconnect to talk all things AI, brand demand, customer marketing. Wish you the best of luck for the rest of the year. And next week, we'll be back, same time. Meg will be joining us. We have a guest who's got a new book, Kathleen Schwab. She'll be talking about go-to-market strategy and her new book that will be coming out shortly. So really looking forward to unveiling that as well. So we will see you next week.
Thanks, John.